Great trade deals are being negotiated right now. We're doing some great trade deals. When that happens, your 4.1 is going to go even higher. We're having a lot of fun.
Talking about some GDP there. That was President Trump defending his trade policy as U.S. and China has failed to reach a deal after 2 days of trade talks in Washington. Now, each country is set to impose $16 billion in tariffs on each other's goods. That's going into effect. Meanwhile, negotiations are continuing between the United States and Mexico as they try to overhaul the North American Free Trade Agreement. How is this all going to shake out? Let's bring in our very own Susan Lee. She's on set with me here in New York. And Chairman at the Center for Freedom and Prosperity, Dan Mitchell. Guys, great to see you.
Good to see you.
There you go.
Dan, I was really disappointed we didn't get more news out of these talks, in particular with Mexico. That seemed to be the most promising of all the trade negotiations that Lighthizer finds himself in the middle of right now. Where do you think we stand with Mexico?
Let's start with the good news.
Okay.
The United States is more pro-trade than either China or Mexico. So it is in our interest to try to negotiate with them to get them to reduce their trade barriers. But here's the frustrating part. There's this debate. Is Trump a protectionist, or is he really a closet free trader trying to get other nations to lower their trade barriers? If you look at what the U.S. government is trying to do vis-a-vis these negotiations with Mexico, we're not trying to lower trade barriers. We're trying to force them to increase auto wages. We're trying to force them to put in a sunset agreement. Those things aren't free trade. So I guess I'm not even disappointed that these negotiations haven't led to anything, because I don't think we're pushing the right policies.
You know, it's interesting, Susan, because if you look at all the different, negotiations that he's got going on right now, really the most important one for the auto industry, it would be Mexico not unraveling those relationships, especially when it comes to auto parts and cars that are actually assembled down there. And with the Germans, the Europeans. I mean, if you think about something that could really hit the U.S. economy, it's automotives.
Automotives and rules of origin, of course, within that NAFTA deal, and how much of the parts need to be from North America vis-a-vis Mexico. I agree with you. You know, some of the headlines that we heard yesterday, it seemed like a deal was imminent with Mexico, right? They were talking. But, things are still on a good track, according to the trade minister from Mexico. A deal is not done until it's done, but it sounds like at least they're talking, unlike the Chinese, which really didn't give in to anything with those mid-level discussions in D.C. I guess maybe they're saving it for the sidelines when Xi and Trump meet on the sidelines of the G20, but it doesn't sound promising right now.
Dan, I think she makes a good point that I think that I don't know that we expected something big to come out of these talks, but at least the talks have began. But it's David Malpass, who's probably sick of being called a lower level,
mid-level.
He's like the lower level talks. I'm sure he's, but I mean, the truth is David Malpass does have a pretty good, sense of what the Chinese are going to do and not do. And Xi is under a lot of pressure in his own country, Dan, to get something done. We have more economic power in a trade fight than they do at the end of the day.
I agree. If there's a trade war, China gets hurt more than the United States. But I think that Navarro, Lighthizer, some of the other people in the Trump administration, they don't seem to appreciate the fact that there's a big concept called FACE. And if the United States government thinks that they can publicly say, China, you give in, you surrender to us, I guarantee you the Chinese leadership is going to deliberately say no, because they don't want to look weak. So I worry we'll get a trade war at the end of all this instead of trade liberalization. And that's not good for China, but it's very bad for the U.S. economy as well.
Well, it's bad if we end up with that $200 billion they're talking about that could potentially take effect on September 5th, I believe was the last date I saw. $200 billion, that's everything, Susan. That's cradles to coffins and everything in between. Your car seats, your toaster, your curling iron,
Apple
all of
watches, Fitbits, Sonos speakers, you name it. But I just want to add to that, because in these China-U.S. trade discussions, there's an element of politics. You just saw President Trump just tweeting, talking about, not much progress when it comes to North Korea, hence a trade talk. This might be stemming from trade. So, yes, there's a political element as well.